Hello, everybody. So today I am here with Captain Matt Berta, U.S. Navy retired, and today he's going to be sharing a little bit about his time in the Navy, sharing some experiences. It is a pleasure to have Captain Berta with us today because he is also a member of the ROTC program at Cornell University, where I'm currently training. So this is a fun special alumni to student connection. So Captain Berta, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, good morning, Ariel. Thanks so much for having me. This is great.
Of course, yeah. So I just want to start off with how long were you in the Navy and what was your job while you were in it?
Well, I just retired last year, September 2019, after 30 years in the Navy, graduating in May of 1989. I can't believe it's the 80s. And so when I say 30 plus years, it's because I got 3 months added on to the very end in order to retire gracefully over the summer last year. But what's funny is that the military never seems to take into account the 4 years you're at school. So I'd love to say that I was in for 34 years because I remember putting on my uniform for the very first time in Barton Hall on August 18th, 1985. So I wish we could count that time. I'm actually coming up on 35 years of my anniversary of doing that. When I went through on one side of the little Navy ROTC building with my head fully feathered back hair from the 80s, and coming out the other side with a buzz cut and in completely wrinkled khaki uniform, and my mom just burst into tears. What did I just get my son into? And so 35 years later, what she got me into was an incredible career. Oh, and you asked what else I did in the Navy. It started out as well, it was entirely a surface warfare career. So driving ships, shooting missiles and guns, and patrolling all around the world. Mostly stationed in San Diego and on the West Coast and doing Western Pacific tours. That was for the first half of my career. And then the second half, if you want to get into the specifics, I became what we called a full-time support officer, always on active duty for all 30 years. But for the second half, I was what in the Army they call active guard reserve. So technically a reservist, but on active duty the entire time to support the reserve component of our Navy in this case, but of our military as I got more senior and served a lot of time in the Pentagon. The Pentagon, by the way, is like a roach motel. Once you check in, you can't check out. And I checked in initially in 2006 and became a member of the Navy staff, then a member of the Joint Staff with Chairman Mullen and then Chairman Dempsey, Admiral Mullen and General Dempsey, served under them. And then finally concluded my career on the Office of the Secretary of Defense staff, working on all Navy Reserve, all military reserve component and National Guard policies. So spanning the career from sailing at sea to sailing the halls of the Pentagon. So it's amazing how I look back on it now that it's been 30 plus years, and to have people like you going through the ROTC program now that I didn't cherish at the time, but I now cherish as a memory. And my son going through ROTC right now at his school, hoping that he's going to go off to fly for the Navy someday himself. I'm just in awe. So thank you for inviting me to talk today. I appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. So it sounds like you definitely have a wide range of experience within the Navy. And I think we can count it as 35 years.
Okay, good.
I feel like that counts.
My paycheck, the retired paycheck doesn't count it, but my mom and my wife do.
No, that's all that matters. So from all your time in the Navy, what would you say, do you have a favorite memory that sticks out, or one of your favorite memories from the time?
You know, every time I'm asked that question, there's one memory that comes to mind initially, and it was so fleeting, but it's obviously vivid because it comes to mind every time that question's asked. And it's of, I'm a very junior officer. I think I was a lieutenant junior grade. I think it was 91, 92 time frame. And we are sailing on my very first ship, the USS Fox, which is a guided missile cruiser that's now a Razor Blade. And we were going through the Straits of Juan de Fuca. No, that's near Seattle. No, we were further north. This is near Anchorage. I remember this. This is going into either Juneau or going to Anchorage. It was somewhere near Alaska. And the ocean waters were as still as a pond. You could actually see steam coming off in the morning. And this was because they're so far north, and I think it was in the June time frame. You can imagine that the hours, the daylight hours are very long that time. And I had the morning watch, the Rev watch, the Reveille watch it's called, which is from 4 to 8 in the morning. And so I have to get up at 3, get on watch, get ready to go. And I take the watch And here I am responsible for, this time it's roughly 500 personnel on this huge ship. And I'm the one driving the ship. The captain's asleep. The majority of the ship is asleep. The only people who are awake are those on watch and engineering in our Common Information Center and on the bridge. And as we're sailing through this pond, almost like mill water, serene atmosphere with the sun already pretty much up. It's like dawn all night long, or dusk. And in the distance, we saw orcas just breaching, just riding along with us off to the side. And that memory is a vivid one to me, because like, oh my God, does it ever get any better than this? And I guess it never really did. That vision I have in my head, just seeing that, was like, wow, I'm one of the rare people in the world that gets to experience something like this. And so when you ask the question, what's my favorite memory, that's the one that comes to mind. But what really that encompasses is all the other memories of seeing the world. The adage in the 80s, at least the motto was join the Navy, see the world. And they still kind of say that, but it truly resonated with me, especially back then, because I was only going to do 4 years and get out. That was it. I was going to do 4 years, pay back my ROTC scholarship requirement of service, because again, I don't know how the heck I got into Cornell to begin with, but when I did, I got to find a way to pay for this thing. And this Marine recruiter says, hey, we can give you a scholarship to become a Marine officer. And he almost enlisted me until my father said, you realize you're joining up with a group of people as an enlistee, and they're going to send you to college sometime in the future. So I went back and found out, oh no, they do an ROTC thing. Okay, well, what's ROTC mean? So that's where I learned what that's all about. Joined up, and I was actually a Marine option Navy ROTC to pay back for Cornell, to join the Navy and see the world. What's this Marine thing have to do with? Well, as I learned, the Marines are part of the Navy, and fast forward to a year later, okay, that Marine thing's not for me, but Navy commander, I'd love to chat with you some more. Can I do that Navy thing instead? And switched over my scholarship because I wanted to see the world. If I'm going to do this, I might as well go have some fun and do it for the minimum amount of time. I mentioned my son wants to go fly for Navy. That's a commitment. That's like maybe 8-10 years of commitment. At the time, 4 years was it. If you're a service worker guy, if I wanted to go nuclear submarines, I'd have to do at least 6 years, maybe even 8. And if I wanted to go any other branch of the Navy, it was more of a commitment. I wanted the bare minimum commitment, 4 years, join the Navy. And where can I go that takes me as far away from New York as possible, but still staying on land? It was San Diego, California. And so on that ship and on all the other subsequent ships I ended up staying in long before, got to see camels in Saudi Arabia, got to see koalas in Australia, got to see many restaurants. And the joke became that every bar looks the same to the bottom of a beer glass, and it's true. And so as many times I may have had too many in many of those bars, I started to learn that I wanted to experience what it's like to be in these places. So when I became a little bit more older and I started having kids, when I visited these places, I would actually go and experience their food and their culture. And so that's the memories. It's a very long-winded answer to your short question about my favorite memories, but that's what comes to mind when I think about my favorite memories.
No, that's awesome. That's definitely one of the things that I'm most looking forward to, is getting to see the world. I've never been out of the country, so
really,
yeah.
Not even Canada.
My goal is to hit all 50 states. So I figured that once I got out of college, my career would take me out of the country. So I was never itching to go as a kid. But now I'm looking forward to where my jobs will take me in terms of seeing the world. So that's definitely something exciting.
I didn't think about it until I was getting close to retiring also. But with respect to hitting all 50 states, I was counting up, and I'm at 46. And the 4 that I haven't been to is because there's really nothing Navy related, or any reason the Navy wouldn't have sent me to those states or even through those states. Because many of the states I count are because I had to do many cross-country trips. So I drove either I-70 or I-40 or I-10, depending on where I want to go through, to add more states to my repertoire. So, and the 4 states, you can probably imagine, are North and South Dakota, Wyoming, and Montana. There's nothing up there that's Navy specific that would have any reason to go there. So one of these days, as a retiree, my wife and I wanted to actually just go travel all 4 of those states just to add in my list. But all the other ones, for the most part, predominantly because it was in the Navy.
That's awesome. Well, then I'm glad that hopefully the Army is similar in the sense that I will have that in my future, where we'll get to complete that goal of hitting all 50 states.
Well, definitely in the Army, because, as a landlocked institution, you guys don't have to be near the water like we are. So all my states I hit were the coast really quickly. So hitting those middle states, it's odd that we have our personnel department is all headquartered in Tennessee. So, but in your case, yeah, you're not required to live near the water. You're just lucky you are in some cases, but you're going to be landlocked when you go to places like Fort Knox, Fort Huachuca, places like that.
So maybe I will get those, the Dakotas and Wyoming and Montana up there.
Maybe. The Air Force, definitely. I think they have a lot of stuff up there.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I agree that I can't say that the Army's made me quite a morning person yet, but I do agree that prior to 7 a.m. is probably some of the most peaceful memories that I have from training. So
those are fond memories?
Peaceful. Not sure I'd say fond, but peaceful.
Okay.
Sunrise on long runs. Yeah, it could be nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. So then going on, I guess, opposite from the favorite side, what would you say is like the biggest struggle or the biggest obstacle that you faced throughout your time in the Navy?
Well, you know, again, what came to mind first when you asked the question is balance, balance with my family. And I really started to learn that along with that second half of my career. I mentioned working as a full-time support officer with reservists and then eventually guardsmen and reservists, because the balance between family and military life is different than a work-life balance you hear, especially nowadays when you hear COVID-19, everyone working from home. How do you strike a good balance while you're already at home with the family and loved ones that you're getting sick of occasionally? And so the work-life balance with the military is different in that, yes, it's great when I'm working in the Pentagon. That's just like having I was going to jokingly say a 9-to-5 job, but like it's a half-day job. You know, going in at 6 and coming home at 6. So it's when you're working half days in the Pentagon, that's a little bit more normal. But when you've got prepared to go away at a moment's notice, or even with long-term notice that you're going to be deployed for a while, that's a different kind of balance. You know, balancing and struggling. So the challenge, if you will, of having my wife, who was newly married early on in my career, balancing how she's going to start her career and how we're going to start a family and raise a family with as little, I'm not going to say distraction, but frustration and challenge, if you will, with having me in the military and traveling all around the world. And so struggling with that, it really does come down to how strong your support network is. In this case, my wife is the foundation of that support network, but the family as a whole, even before I met my wife, my parents in support and friends that I made, we're talking about friends that we have at the Cornell Hotel School. I leaned on those friends extensively to start my career, and everyone that's out there, you have to have a support network to lean on so that when you do go away on a short notice or for long term, when I deployed and I hadn't even met my wife yet, I had to rely on roommates friends that I made to take care of my car and take care of my apartment, my things. And so that's the biggest challenge, is how you're going to do those things that everyone else doesn't take for granted, but you still got to pay the bills. How do you pay the bills when the internet doesn't even exist in the early 90s and you still have to make sure the lights stay on in your apartment? Those kinds of challenges now are handled differently with technology maybe today. But nonetheless, it certainly is what comes to mind when you ask me the question. I'm in awe, however, now of working with guardsmen and reservists who have 3 balls in the air juggling. Right now, if I'm balancing my work and my family life, as most civilians do, and it's a guardsman reservist challenge to balance 3 things simultaneously: their civilian work career, their family, and then they got that military thing that's always up in the air and can land on either side. And so we joke that if they truly are juggling, if they know how to juggle well, then they keep all 3 balls up in the air at any one time. Another joke might be that if you're equally pissing off all 3 of those entities, then you're doing a good job because they're all equally mad at you, because you're devoting time to one of the other things and not that thing that's most important at the time. And so what I learned is it's not necessarily 3 equal balls. One of them is always crystal, and the crystal ball changes many times. Sometimes your focus needs to be on your civilian career. Sometimes you have to make sure that you're going to stay viable in your civilian career, so you have promotion potential, that kind of stuff. And so attention focuses on that crystal ball, and it can't drop. One of the other 2 might have to bounce a couple of times. And many times that's the military career, kind of bounces and goes under the couch because you can't focus on that right now. But eventually you're going to get mobilization orders, and now that becomes the crystal ball, and it has to stay in the air, and your civilian employer needs to understand, and thankfully most employers do nowadays. And I haven't even talked about the family yet. The family is always a crystal ball. You never really should let drop, but occasionally they do feel like they're being dropped. And so how do you balance that without ever breaking the crystal ball at the time? And sometimes your family does come first. In your civilian occupation, you can take some time off away from that. Military career, listen, this needs to be on hold. I need to focus on family. I've got a challenge here, or I've got an opportunity here that I want to take advantage of. That's the crystal ball at the time. So I think that obstacle, that description of that obstacle is probably the best way I can describe what I went through, what you're probably going to go through in some way yourself, and what those currently serving are still going through.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I think it's a really good perspective with the juggling analogy. So, and that's definitely, I don't think that's probably not something that many people outside the military would think of to be the biggest obstacle, but that's definitely a good insight to what military personnel are facing when they're serving. So I'm glad you were able to shine the light on that. So now, like you said, you were recently retired. So congratulations, first of all.
Cheers. Thank you.
Yes. So what do you miss most about the Navy now that you're retired?
Well, what I'm noticing in civilian life, and I'd heard about this too, is that there's a different feel of camaraderie, a different feel of focus. And so it's the answer to your question, I think, is mission focus. It seems daunting and challenging to get up at 3 a.m. to drive a ship through calm waters at the time, but then also I remember vividly on Christmas Day, 1991, sailing through the Strait of Hormuz, right past Oman and right next to Iran, and wondering if we're going to get, attacked at any time or on edge at any time. And so the fact that everyone on that ship had the same focus, whether the focus was somewhat more defensive in nature, if we get attacked, this is what we're going to do for damage control and firefighting, or an offensive nature, that if we get attacked, this is how we're going to retaliate. We all had one focus, and that is the survivability of the ship and the viability of the ship, and maintaining that viability. That mission is ingrained in everyone on that ship, or anyone in the military. There's always something that you're goal oriented, and that even if you don't achieve the goal, in fact, that's actually success in many cases, in that you were ready and never needed to pull that trigger, never needed to activate that plan that you had in place. But being ready to do so is a focus, is a mission focus. And I ended up signing up with a company as a consultant to try to give back to the military in my case, but give back to many organizations, civilian, public, and private, to help with focus, to help with setting missions, mission statements, vision statements, that kind of stuff. So, because the military, it's almost as well, it is kind of beat into you with when you start with boot camp and work your way through your career. I take that for granted now to look back on it, because it was so obvious when we showed up every morning. We all knew what our goal was, what our job was that day, so we just did it. And when you had some people that were falling behind, you kind of grab them by the bootstraps and you help pull them along. We're going this way, as opposed to the civilian life, where I don't know anything about their family lives. I don't know anything about what they do outside, like I do in the military. We need to know our folks. And so I was actually pleasantly surprised when one of the folks I work with invited me over to their house for a wine tasting, to get to know another side of what they do. That's normal in the military. In fact, we moved into a neighborhood here in Northern Virginia where everyone here is federal something, majority military, retired military, supporting the federal government in some way. That sense of camaraderie is, listen, in this case, the mission is a successful, it takes a village to raise the tribe. We picked this village, if you will, because it's going to raise our tribe. And my new focus, is the purpose of this discussion. The mission focus is now making sure we're setting our kids off into their futures. And so the mission focus of a civilian network like that is not waning as much but it's also not as strong as when you're actually in the military. So I do miss that most, is that mission focus, but I do try to instill it in the civilian life I live now.
That's good. I'm glad that you have been able to bring that to civilian life. I know that for me, I really enjoyed the discipline, and that was something that, looking back, like when I was in high school and grade school, that I had it from my school activities to a minor extent, but coming to college and having that the discipline from training in college has definitely been a step up, and I'm looking forward to have that throughout my life. So I like to hear it from the other side that you're able to still bring that back into your civilian life afterwards. So it's reassuring. So then to conclude our interview, I just want to ask, do you have any words of wisdom for the younger generation, maybe people thinking about joining the Navy or just starting out, what you want to say to them, maybe what you wish someone had told you when you were just at the beginning?
Having been in command, at command twice, that question does get asked a lot. And so the reflection that I'm going through right now in my head is, there is no one pill to take as a solution to answer that question. However, everyone's situations will be different, so that's why it depends is always a good answer to start with. It depends. But the adage that I latched onto early on in my career is one that actually goes back to the Bible, if you will, but it's summarized in the three words: bloom where planted. You never know where you're going to land, whether you're going to land in a very fertile area or a very rocky area. I had some very tough tribulations to deal with as a junior officer on that first ship, USS Fox, where I literally brought to tears in how horrific the leadership style of this executive officer was on our ship. He was a tyrant, and a stereotypical one at that, and sadly a product of the 70s into the 80s, of the in your face and all things else be damned. We're going to get through this come hell or high water, and it's more likely hellish. And so I felt I was planted in an incredibly rocky place, to the point where I was going to say, okay, this is why I'm getting out after 4 years. There's no need to stick around. And as it turned out, the silver lining was that I learned how not to be a great leader from that particular individual. And a quick sidebar: the last day of his time on our ship, we celebrated with a huge party in his honor, of course, not inviting him. On October 23rd, 1992, it was a Friday, and it was at that party that one of my shipmates invited some friends over, and one of those friends happened to be my current wife. So that's where we met. So the day that we met became the silver lining around that dark cloud that was looming for a year and a half until he finally left the ship. And so it started a new friendship, and it started an affair that allowed us to blossom and bloom where planted, realizing that, my wife telling me, you can do it better than he can. I can tell it. And use that energy towards how to make it better for those that are going to follow in your footsteps. And I use that in that analogy with young sailors coming in the military, to describe to them that, listen, nothing is going to be great. We're going to give you all the tools in your tool bag, but knowing which one to reach for at the right time comes with experience. And sometimes you're going to reach for that hammer when what you need is a fine screwdriver. And unfortunately, that tyrant reached for the hammer every time. And so once you do that, then you can look back on, this is the second bit of advice, and I kind of heard about it recently, especially with those like you going through missing out on the second half of your semester, or like my daughter who's graduating from high school this year virtually, like my soon-to-be daughter-in-law who is just graduated from the Coast Guard Academy this week, is that you need to realize that you're actually, you right now, Ariel, you're in your good old days right now. And so when you reflect on the good old days, you don't realize you're in them until they're past. And so it's amazing to me, after 30 years in the Navy, when I look back, how maybe At the time, it didn't feel all that great. But if you stop and take mental pictures, and maybe if you've watched The Office and you remember at the wedding, they're doing the mental pictures all the time to try to capture that moment. Capture the moments while you can, to realize that these are those good old days. And so I miss the days of hanging out. I didn't get to know your dad all that well. We were a couple of years apart in school, but I knew him as a member of a great group of gentlemen. Of course, at the time, maybe we weren't gentlemen, but nowadays look back and we reflect on the good old days. I didn't realize how good I had it. And so that's the advice I would give you, is that once you do land, you're going to have to make your ground as fertile as you can, realizing that you're not going to get the ideal dream job. And if you do, God bless you. But it won't always be a wonderful day. But for the most part, every day becomes the good old days, a part of them. You just have to get through that grind when you're getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning every day. I hope that you get to go to work, not have to go to work. There is a subtle difference. Many days I had to go to work to get up and go to the shift yet again. However, when I look back on it now, I got the opportunity. I had that wonderful opportunity to be amongst great people in our Navy and in our military, and heck, serving in the Pentagon with great leaders, shoulder to shoulder with Admiral Mullen as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It is an honor that I got to sit in a room with him and let him talk about what happened in the White House the night before. When I look right now, it's like, oh my God, these are the good old days. I'm sitting in a room right now listening to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff speak. How did I get here? I look back on that now and say, I'm never going to be there again, but I can bounce my grandkids and my niece someday and tell them what the good old days were like and how I bloomed where I was planted. So hopefully that summarizes what wisdom I can probably pass on to the next generation.
For sure. That's great advice. Definitely something that I will hold on to, and I hope that any future Navy members, Army, Air Force, whatever branch people are looking to join, I hope that's something that resonates with other people of the young generation as well. So I want to thank you so much for joining me. I hope that everybody watching enjoyed this, got something out of this. Captain Berta, thank you again for joining me. It was a pleasure to have you.
All right, go Navy.
Oh, no, go Army.
Take care.
Bye.